different. Okay. So I welcome everybody that's coming in from the different states and countries. And so today it's going to be the first part of the lectures on Soga Ryojin. And today I want to focus on the Honko talks that he gave in Los Angeles. If some of you have this book, Cultivating Spirituality, I didn't put the picture of Soga on my PowerPoint because I don't know if you can see this picture very well, but he looks like Freddie Mercury in this picture. He's very young. He's got a mustache and short hair. You can always put the t-shirt on him and a microphone. So the picture I have is more thing. The other thing I want to note, besides that book, there is this huge 550 or so pages book called the Soga Ryojin Reader, and it's a collection of translation by his primary translator, which is Jan von Brock. And it has a fantastic introduction by Michael Conway. So if anyone has the means to try to get this book, it's worth it for that introduction. But it's like a collection of all kinds of stuff, including the main essays by Soga that von Brock had translated. So this is one very rare source of Soga in English, besides the Cultivating Spirituality. And I think Paul from Minnesota mentioned the Buddha Eye. I don't remember if Soga's in there, but he may be in that that volume. So I'm going to go to my first slide. Oh, I got it. Okay. Emiko says she doesn't have that Freddie Mercury picture in her volume. Okay. So share screen. Uh-oh. Oh, Osan, can you let me share my screen? I'm not showing.
It's supposed to be able to do. I already.
Really?
Yeah.
It's not showing. Oh, here it is. Okay, I got it. Okay. There it goes. Okay. So the first slide is a picture some of you may have already seen of Soga talking with Haya Akirasu, and they were lifelong friends, having met under Kiyozawa's group. And so you see Soga, his dates. And the one thing I want to say about Soga, the reason why we're taking two sessions to talk about him, is normally what Soga is known for in his talks and in his writings is what they call very dense kind of ideas. When I was at Otani University, there was a Shuchu Kogi, these, and they have it at colleges here in the States where when you have a break time between semesters, they may offer like a 1 or 2 week course. And so they're offering this 2-week course on Soga at Otani. And I said, oh yeah, I get to read some Soga. And they mentioned they're going to be reading a particular essay by Soga. But as it turned out, we only got through maybe 2 sentences for 10 sessions. And the teacher, Honda Hiroyuki, he could probably spend 2 lectures just talking about one word that Soga and how he used it, that in his sentences and just in his phrasing, there's just so much stuff to unpack. It's just packed with ideas and concepts. So reading Soga is very difficult even for the Japanese, because there's so much in his writings and in his talks. And one of the things I did when I was a student was I attended the Soho Gakusha, which is Yasuda Rijin's study center. He had died 2 years before I got to Otani, but it was Honda Hiroyuki sensei was continuing the meetings there, and I got invited to the housewives group, the Shifu no Kai, and they were reading Soga's commentary on the Tani Sho, and it was really difficult. I mean, we're just, there's two graduate students that led the group that helped us to read through the sentences. And I even said to those ladies, why did you pick such a difficult thing to read? And they said they wanted it that way. They wanted something that would be challenging and also have a lot of depth. And they said, if you, both Honganji, Nishi and Higashi, she said they put out all these little pamphlets that are supposed to make things very easy, but they're a little shallow and superficial. I always tell a story when I went to Hosokan, the famous bookstore in Kyoto. They had a book that says, Buddhism made simple. It's all in Japanese. It said recommended for students and women. It didn't say housewives or anything. It said like the whole female genders and women. So there was this thing that books written for women or the lay people had to be simple, but these ladies chose to read Soga's commentary in the Tani Sho. And then I ran into somebody, Keiko-san, this lady that had studied at Otani about 5 years after me. And she also talked about joining the housewife study group. And I said, what are they reading? What were they reading? She said, oh, Soga's commentary on the Tani Sho. So even 5 years later, they were still trying to read through that writing. So Soga's writing in general is known for being that kind of dense. So we saw last time Kaneko's writing is more like an outline form, but here Soga is known for that very dense kind of writing, and it makes it very difficult to translate into English because of the denseness of the writing. So Von Braun deserves a lot of credit for doing that. But one of the things with him is that he's not only a Belgian, he's not a native English speaker, he's also a Catholic priest. So I think there's a need to read about Soga by other translators, and hopefully the Shinshu Center America will be working on that. So the book I'm going to be talking about today is, if you're going to read anything by Soga, this is a good place to start. And I really applaud the Shinshu Center America for using this as the first publication of a Soga translation. And it's available only on ebook. So unfortunately, if you don't have that set up for yourself, it is hard to get to it. But what makes this different from his regular writings and his regular talks is he's been invited to Los Angeles by the Higashi Honganji Betsuin, and he knows he's talking not his normal Japanese audience, but he's talking to Japanese Americans, and he wants not to get them too confused, and it's hard for him to gauge, where their understanding is at. He spoke over a weekend session, and he referenced mostly the Tani Sho. He felt he hoped that they were familiar with many of the phrases of the Tani Sho. And what is amazing to me is a lot of us probably, especially those of you tuning in from the Los Angeles Betsuin, you probably knew the people that were there. It might have been your aunts and uncles, your grandparents, your parents' friends. So he's talking, it's not like when we study these other thinkers, they're talking to audiences that we really don't know, but here he's talking to an audience that some of us may know, have some connection to. And one person, of course, I feel that I knew personally was Bishop Nodi's mother. And she actually had to nurse Reverend Soga when he fell ill during the time he was in Los Angeles. And those of you who know the Betsuin know that he left this wonderful calligraphy as a thank you gift to her that's hanging in the conference room wall. So the event at Los Angeles, it's very significant, I think, for us here that he took the time and trouble at his advanced age in his 80s to come to America. And Bishop Nodi's father wrote the introduction to these lectures, saying that, talking about the Issei's bringing their money together to bring somebody home from Japan. In those days, it was quite a expense to do that. And Nodi's father felt, if you're going to bring someone from Japan, good to get the best of the best. And that was Reverend Soga. He was the outstanding scholar and thinker at that time. So it's just, that just the fact that it's connected to us. It's something that we know. We may know people who were there, or we may be connected to some of the people who were there in this book. And so that's why I advise everyone, if you can get the ebook, and I hope some of you already have read it, it is worth looking into. So I was going to just go over some major points, but in the first sermon, right away off the bat, he says, do not rely on logic, which is discriminatory thinking. And for most of us, especially raised in our Western education, we were taught about the scientific approach, being rational, being logical, that is the way to approach all problems, is being analytical. And what that works for maybe science and math, for engineering problems, for technology. But very early on, Buddha realized it doesn't work for our interpersonal relationships. It doesn't work for how we relate to other lives. And the reason is because when we start bumping up against other lives, our self-interest kicks in. And so logic or rational thinking is easily hijacked by that self-interest. So right away, Soga says, do not rely on logic, and points out, that's because it's based on self-interest. And he quotes the famous line in Tanisho chapter 10, that in the Nembutsu, the translator of these lectures is Wayne Yokoyama, I mentioned him last time. And he put for this translation of Mugi Omote Gitosu, he put non-discrimination is the essence. But if most of the translations, the word gi is contrasted with mugi, not gi. So I would say the principle in the Nembutsu is no principle. And because once we start getting hung up on principles, and that's part of logical thinking, we can easily get sucked in by our self-interest. So the Nembutsu is kind of a way to give us an overriding principle, which is to have no principles, to have no logical discrimination. Discrimination meaning putting things in categories, ranking them, speaking about the differences, that sort of thinking that is very essential to our education and for most of what we do in society. But as Shinran realized, that only gets you so far, and the Nembutsu is the way to overcome that, is this overriding principle of having no principles, if that makes sense. But as Wayne Yokoyama translated Reverend Soga, non-discrimination is the essence. So that's great that he starts off right off the bat giving this very essential teaching of Buddhism to the audience. And then in sermon 2, what really hit me is he talks about symbols. So if you think about at the time he's doing these lectures in the mid-50s, a lot of the Issei are still thinking about the old, like I said, my grandma's Jodo Shinshu, of this Amida figure that is bringing people to the Pure Land after they die. And so it takes on kind of this reified form, Amida Buddha. But right away, I mean, not right away, but Soga eases people into the idea that, no, these are just symbols. When we talk about Amida, Pure Land. These are just symbols. So he's following on with what his friend Kaneko was talking about. And so he said, Buddha Dharma does not speak of things having substance. So he uses the word symbol to let people know these things we talk about do not have real substance. They're not like a real fixed thing. And in fact, in Buddhism, nothing has a fixed substance. But conventionally, we think things do. And we tend to project that onto religious concepts. So he says that really everything is a symbol because we realize when we think things are substantial, it's the vanity of self-interest. So here he's letting them know, like with the logic, that it's our self-interest that makes us think there are substantial things in the world, and especially to project that onto religious concept, because we ourselves want to think we have substance, that we have some kind of permanent thing to us that makes us uniquely us, and gives us a right to assert our existence. So that's that idea of self-interest. So a lot of you heard that idea of the skillful means, the finger pointing to the moon. And so as all Buddhists say, that the reality is beyond description. In fact, that's what Shiran says in Tanisho too, that things are beyond description. So we need symbols as a way to help us direct our minds to these things that are beyond description. And that's what reality is. And he goes into the Dharmakata story, but next time we're going to go deeper into how he presented Dharmakata Bodhisattva from the story from the larger sutra. So to me, what he talks about the symbols is very, in a way, it might have been very mind shifting or paradigm shifting for when I think about the Iseis that are listening to this. And maybe some of the Kibe Nisei, these Japanese Americans who are very heavily influenced by the traditional way of looking at Jodo Shinshu, to hear this great scholar tell them it's all symbols. And in fact, most of the things in life really is a symbol. It's standing for something that is real, but it's not the thing that they are is not real. It's just a symbol. So to me, that's the significant point of Sermon 2. But Sermon 3, this is where I get into this idea. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but in Japanese we say jishin, meaning self, and we use the word body. And that's just standard Japanese. But when you think about it in English, we don't talk about ourselves as a body that much. We tend to think that what we call self is I call it like Casper the Ghost. There's some kind of floating around essence that we would call ourself. And actually, what we are is a body. We are the skin, and everything in the skin and everything contained in the skin is a body, is really what our self is that's our living existence, is as a body. So what is a very standard Japanese thing to say, jishin, in English, so even the translator Wayne put the self of deep space. He doesn't say the body, our body of deep faith. So it's very standard in translation not to say jishin is our body. But if you look at Shinran, he uses that term, me. For me, he say this body, this body. He refers to himself as the body, as a body. And this gets to be something I think we don't talk about enough in Buddhism, is that we think Buddhism is transmitted primarily through words, but there's so much going on in what you could call body language. And here, Soga Sensei says to have this deep faith is not just, well, I say I don't want to be egocentric. I don't be self-centered. I want to put my trust entirely in Amida, in this reality. But actually, he's reminding you, you are part of that reality. Your body is reality. You can't ignore this body of yours. That is also part of the reality that you must trust. That so Jinshin means this deep trust, to have this deep trust in your own existence. And so he explains trusting yourself by saying, I'm great, is how people usually understand trusting oneself. Though that may be the case, our founder Shinran Shonin would say, I do not have any redeeming point, not a single redeeming point. True self-trust is the self-trust of nothingness. The person who has abandoned the self-trust of being and discovered the self-trust of nothingness was none other than our Shinran Shonin. So here, that Buddhist concept of nothingness, or you could say emptiness, is the idea that our life is this flow. It's this flow that's ever dynamic. It's not some fixed entity, not some fixed substance. So for Shinran, I do not have any redeeming point. He's kind of saying there's nothing fixed in me that I can say is truly good. There may be some days where I do something good, there may be some days I do something bad, but I can't claim to have some fixed quality in me that I can call good. And if we look at ourselves, we could say, oh, I'm an honest person. But in reality, we have lied. We have told falsehoods to protect ourselves or to protect other people. There are times when we do good things, but there's time we do some really nasty things to other people. So for Shinran to take this very Buddhist position that not seeing oneself as having any redeeming point, having any substantial good point to point to. And that kind of goes against a lot of I've heard other Buddhist groups say about, oh, the natural goodness. Every person has this natural goodness. But Shinran would say we have to be careful of saying that kind of thing, because really Buddhism is talking about this emptiness. Nothing has substantiality. Everything is in this flow and is dynamic, and there's nothing I can claim as my particular good quality. So Shinran's trust in himself is to trust this life of dynamic change, to trust this body that gets tired, that sometimes gets off its butt and does some good things, and sometimes just messes things up. To just trust that this is my life. This is I am part of this reality. So it's kind of interesting that Soga ends his series with this idea. So that's why the Japanese title of the Japanese published publication of these lectures is called Jinshin Jishin. That is this my body to deeply entrust my life, my body. My body is being part of reality. My body is not a substantial thing. We all know that we're falling apart, right? That our cells are always changing, our organs are not always functioning the way we want them to. And as we get older, the hair turns white, and for a lot of people, they start to fall out. So the body itself is our proof that we are part of this continuous change, which is life. So we would rather think that there's some kind of self apart from that, that there's some kind of ghostly essence that's somewhere, but really the body is our life. And so this is a theme that comes up a lot in Soma Soga's writing, is talking about our life as a body. And so what I started saying at the beginning of this concept is kind of what I wanted to say in the introduction about Soga, that Soga started out as a young student criticizing Kiyozawa and the Seishin Shugi movement. He took this stance that they have all these nice concepts and everything, And he thought, well, compared to traditional Jodo Shinshu, they really weren't offering anything. And so Michael Conway gave a lecture to the ministers one time talking about Soga having this sharp criticism of Seishin Shugi. But then Soga attended some kind of a conference where all these other scholars were piling on to Kiyozawa. They just started bad mouthing him and tearing him down, and just getting kind of insulting and very rude to him. And what Soga saw, and so I don't remember exactly what Michael Conway said Soga said, but actually it's what Soga saw that changed his mind about Kiyozawa. He saw, I guess you could say, he saw the person who trusted in the nothingness of his body, that there's no reason to defend himself, there's no reason to get upset with people calling you names, because there's no self there, that there's no substantial self that he has to defend or be offensive, go on the offensive for either. So what Soga witnessed in Kiyozawa was this person whose appearance, whose own body is demonstrating the Buddhist teaching of nothingness, this demonstrating how their trust in their self is not this egocentric, self-centered kind of way that naturally most of us fall into. But what he witnessed with seeing Kiyozawa was the idea of someone who just their whole being illustrates this total trust in reality, and not letting any thing get to him that has to do with his any substantial ideas of self. So this is something that I think we don't talk about enough in Jodo Shinshu, especially like when we talk about Shinran. I write about his encounter with Myohobo that you could find in his biography, but it's not so much what he said to the man who shows up at his door with weapons in hand ready to kill him. It's just Myohobo recognized this was a different kind of person. I mean, this is a person with a different kind of attitude, not a defensive or an offensive attitude of someone who's clinging to themselves, afraid for their lives, or wanting to convert somebody, but just someone who's just simply being, simply trusting in life itself. And so even though Shinran says this stuff like, I do not have any redeeming point, in his body, he showed people what that looks like. It means to have this total openness towards life and not this defensive or offensive kind of stance. And Shinran saw that in Honen. So what Shinran saw when he met Honen is this very open-minded, open-hearted person, not so much in his words, but in his whole being that he showed in his body. So when Shinran in the Kyogyo Shinsho says the larger sutra is true because it starts off with the shining face of the Buddha. He's really saying, I knew I met my teacher because I saw a person whose body was that being. And so shining face, they actually, they use the word face, it's body. It's talking about the body is showing, is expressing this this sense of being a part of reality and accepting all lives around them as part of the same reality. So for Shinran to say the larger sutra is true because of Kogen Gigi, because of the Buddha's face is brightly shining, it's really Shinran's testament to how he met Honen. And I think that's kind of what Soga maybe witnessed with Kiyozawa. It's more obvious when we talk later about Akigarasu. That's what he saw in Kiyozawa. So it's not just about Shinran's words or Kiyozawa's words that we read on paper, but to know that the people who encountered them encountered what happens in the larger sutra, that they we're in the presence of someone who is in their whole being, meaning in their body, um, showing this life of total, um, I guess, identification with life as a dynamic flow. So this idea of body is very strong in Buddhism, but especially um, Soga refers to these very substantial idea of the body. Um, so I would hope that the people who went to hear him in LA, they also saw in Soga Sensei that somebody, maybe they don't understand everything he's saying, but they could see in his body that there's something there. There's something that is pointing the way to help us get past our um, attachment to self-preservation and self-assertion, and start to open up to this connection with other lives. So that's kind of my summary of what's in that um, lecture, but there's so much more to that. So I hope a lot of people read it. But so I think it's a very gentle way to get into Soga, get some of his major themes in there, and but without that denseness that he's normally known for. And so I really hope that the Shinshu Center of America does eventually publish more things about Soga, more of his writings. I know Wayne Yokoyama has done a lot of work, but there's a lot of work to be done in going over those translations, and maybe they've recruited other people to do. I know Michael Conway's translated bits and pieces of Soga, and I hope we could see some of that come to light as well. But know that that's Soga's influence. So Kaneko was somebody that had to organize Jodo Shinshu in this modern presentation, and he was very helpful, especially for students and ministers. But Soga's influence is much deeper and maybe harder to pin down. But I would say most of the teachers I had at Otani, you could tell there's a deep reverence for how Reverend Soga touched their lives. That maybe, yeah, everyone say it's hard to understand him. There's a lot of unpacking to do in his words, but he had this seeking spirit. And so one of the things in the Soga reader that Michael Conway brings up in his introduction is Soga didn't see himself as a scholar. And that's what I said at the beginning of this series. He saw himself as a seeker, that there's this dilemma of what we call human life, and how we look to the teachings to get ourselves to open up to, I could say, a way to deal with that dilemma, and to find this, what he's talking, find this trust in the nothingness of our own being, and to see that interconnection with all life. But the thing with Soga is he realized by looking deeply at Shinran's teachings, and he said that was one of his criticisms of Seishin Shugi, that they didn't use the traditional literature so much. So he does spend a lot of time using traditional literature, but going through the lens of modernity, of being influenced by Western philosophy, he's able to go deeply into these concepts and trying to convey it to other people. But one of the things in the Soga reader that Michael Conway says that Soga himself even reports that when he's talking or when he's writing, a lot of it is just a dialogue within himself, that he's trying to question things and find the answers for himself. And at one phrase, he even kind of apologized to his audience that you're kind of going along for the ride. He's not doing this, speaking to them in a way that he's consciously trying to teach them something, but he's just sharing with them his process, that he's reading these words of Shinran, of the great Pure Land masters, and trying for himself to find those teachings that help him in his quest to find a connection to the interconnected and flow of life. That's so important. So there's a lot of Soga. I have to admit, I because of his difficulty, I haven't read that much of him in Japanese, and reading him in English, it does. You get the feeling that a lot is being left out, because even so for the next session, I want to go more deeply into his Hoso Bosatsu, his Dharmakara Bodhisattva piece, by shifting the emphasis of the Amida story in Larger Sutra from what they call the result, the fruit, and going back to the seed, meaning the beginning, which is Dharmakara. And those of you who do have the cultivating spirituality, and I hope Reverend Yagi does too, because the work I want to kind of talk about is a savior on earth, the meaning of the Dharmakara Bodhisattva's advent. And it's like he's using Christian concepts and terminology to talk about Dharmakara. And it's kind of a wild essay in that it's like he's yanking everybody's chain. He's yanking the Christians' chains and he's yanking the Buddhist chains to try to shift the way we look at this story, and using Christianity and this idea of Advent and Savior in relation to that. So it's kind of unusual in Buddhism to talk about the word Savior or even the word Advent, but he uses these Christian terms to frame the story of Dharmakara. And he did spend a lot of time in his life, and even you can see in his LA lectures, talking about this story. That it's so I want to talk about it more in depth next time, because it gets kind of crazy in that subject and object become interchanged, or like he even said, the parent is the child becomes a parent. I think for myself, I need to process it a lot. There was a lecture given by Reverend Peter Hatta months or so ago on Avatar, talking about Dharmakara as the Avatar. And after I listened to his lecture, I rented the movie Avatar that some of you might be familiar with. And I was thinking maybe there's something related to the Soga presentation, in that if you were a being on some beautiful planet called the Pure Land, where everybody was empathetic and helped each other, but there's these other beings out there that didn't quite awaken to that interconnection of life, how would you reach them? And maybe you have to go to them and kind of, I guess you could say, infiltrate their bodies and try to get the message to them from the inside, by becoming sort of this, just like in the movie Avatar, the minds of these Americans go into these constructed bodies of the people on the other planet. So maybe that kind of gave me an idea that maybe that little bit explains what Soga was getting into. But like I said, it's something I have to think about a lot and look at some of his other writings on Dharmakara. I was given an essay that was translated by Ito Emyo and Bando Shojun. So I wanted to see if they have their translation kind of sheds light that maybe Van Blanc, being a Catholic priest, doesn't quite pick up on. So we'll see next week, next month, get deeper into that particular. But Soga has so many great presentations that, for the scope of what we're doing here, I didn't think I can get into detail with them, but I'm hoping Shinshu Center of America in the future will get more stuff out in English, and maybe we can even have a full course on Soga as we read together some of those materials. So so let's see. Okay. Yeah, so it's just a chat. We're talking about the thing, and it's kind of interesting. The title is a Thanksgiving sermon, meaning maybe not everybody would know what Honko means, and as many of us in Higashi know that Honko time, the time of Shinran's memorial, happens to fall in late November when we do Thanksgiving, the American holiday. So in a way, Thanksgiving and Honko kind of do go together in the minds of Higashi people. But Honko, he does in those lectures explain how we are giving thanks to Shinran and also following Shinran's example of giving thanks for receiving the teaching. So he does quote Ondoksan, the verse by Shinran, and kind of explain it from there. So the idea of Thanksgiving, I think all of you know, is very central to Buddhism, but especially in Jodo Shinshu. But in his case, or in the case of these lectures, it's about the gratitude for Shinran and his teachings. So I wanted to leave time if anyone, especially if you have read the lectures, like to know some of your thoughts or questions on them. And but I hope I presented some of those. I had to just pick a few points to go on, but I really advise everybody, if you can, to read those lectures. I'm gonna